Welcome back to Animal Appreciation. This week we are going to be technically talking about two different animals, but they are rather closely related. So this week we're talking about both puffins and auklets. So the first of the puffin species is the Atlantic puffin or the common puffin. This is definitely the most well-known puffin species. They're the most distinct one, the one that people always go to if you're like, what's a puffin? True to the name, these guys live in the north parts of the Atlantic Ocean, so not in the ocean, but around the ocean, so around the eastern bits of Canada, like the Maritimes, up into Nunavut, and throughout like Greenland, Iceland, and then over into northern Europe, like Norway, Sweden, Finland, etc., etc. The tufted puffin, however, is basically the opposite of the Atlantic puffin, living around the west coast of North America, all the way from Alaska down through Canada, even down into areas of California, then across the Pacific Ocean around areas of Japan and Russia. And finally, rounding out our last puffin species is the horned puffin. It has a similar range to the tufted puffin, but a bit more northern, it doesn't extend quite as far south, so it's mostly in Alaska and around the coast of British Columbia, around like Haida Gwaii. And then across the Pacific, it's in a bunch of areas around Russia, the Bering Sea, Siberia, all around there. Now, going into the auklets, this is the rhinoceros auklet, so I think this is technically an auklet and not a puffin. However, it does tend to be lumped in with the other three puffin species. So I think it's closely, like, the closest related to puffins out of the auklets, but I think it is still technically an auklet. It's also, just a fun little fact, also called the unicorn auklet, which I think is fun, but yeah. So these guys they're a pretty common bird, but they do have a much smaller range than a bunch of the auklets. As far as I can find, they are only found on the west coast of North America, mainly in British Columbia, so around the Salish Sea, Vancouver Island, Haida Gwaii again, and extending up into areas of Alaska and down into Washington, but largely concentrated around BC. Here's the Cassin's auklet, again, largely on the west coast of North America, but a bit more southern. It can be up into Alaska, down through BC, and extends all the way down to California, and even into Mexico sometimes. So, again, largely on the west coast, but a bunch of more southern regions. This one is the crested auklet. From what I could find, these are quite a bit more northern species, so mainly concentrated around Alaska and around the North Pacific Ocean and the Bering Sea, so quite a bit more northern placed than the other auklet species that I could find. And finally, we have the last auklet species, the parakeet auklet, and I just absolutely love how the Wikipedia article described them. It's basically just said, yes, the parakeet auklet is a small, chunky bird. Like, yep, it sure is, but that's just really funny to me. Again, much like the, crested auklet, it's found mainly in Alaska and around the Bering Sea. They're quite a bit more concentrated, so they don't have quite as wide of an area, but again, just largely up in Alaska. So yeah, here's the puffin species and their closely related cousins, the auklets. And I think they're very fun, especially puffins look absolutely ridiculous, and I am a little bit obsessed with them.